Tracy Fortson was a struggling single mom.
She raised me by herself.
But she had ambitious plans.
She found a way to attend the police academy.
And off-duty, Tracy began a heated love affair with a bodybuilder named Doug Benton.
She said he makes me happy.
But then Doug was found, entombed in concrete.
He was shot in the top of the head.
And the authorities would be left wondering, had Doug's checkered past come back to haunt him?
Just wanted to give him something that he'll be able to remember me by in case something was to happen to me.
That drug dealer said, "You're dead when I get out."
Or did his relationship with Tracy take a deadly turn?
Tracy was very demanding and was very jealous.
The relationship was rocky and tumultuous.
Or was an innocent woman being framed for murder?
She was shocked. We were all shocked. It was like a nightmare.
There's no way she could have done that. My mom did not kill anybody.
Madison County, Georgia, June 17, 2000. It was Saturday afternoon when the sheriff's department received a concerned call from neighbors of 38-year-old Doug Benton.
His neighbors were worried because they kept an eye on his house when he was not there.
And according to the neighbor that called, no one had seen Doug for nearly 2 weeks.
One of his neighbors noticed the birds hadn't been cared for in some time.
He had gotten into trying to raise and sell exotic birds. It was a big investment.
And to protect his investment, Doug never left town without making sure the birds were taken care of.
He always made provision with a neighbor or family or someone to come care for his animals.
So when the neighbor realized that Doug hadn't been around for a while, he'd gone over to the house to check on the birds and made a disturbing discovery.
Those birds were dead inside the cages.
Worried that something might have happened to Doug, his neighbors had called the sheriff's department. When deputies arrived on the scene a few minutes later, they decided the neighbors' concerns were justified.
Based on the animals being deceased and out of fear for his safety, we made a decision to go into the house.
But would they find more than just dead birds?
They had to force open the back door to get into the house.
Once inside, the investigator found nothing amiss.
I don't recall noticing anything out of the ordinary in the entire house.
But did that mean he'd simply left of his own free will?
Doug's wallet, Doug's pager, Doug's cell phone, those were all missing.
Or was Doug actually a missing person? To find out, the Madison County Sheriff's Department turned to the woman Doug had been dating for the last 9 months, 35-year-old Tracy Fortson. But would she help them find Doug, or would she only add to the mystery surrounding his disappearance? Born in 1964, Tracy Fortson grew up outdoors amid the rolling hills and farms of rural Madison County.
She liked to go fishing. She liked to ride on motorcycles. She liked to ride horses.
Anything that pertains to outdoors, Tracy enjoyed it.
Tracy loved the outdoors so much that she spent her childhood longing to be a forest ranger. But that dream was put on hold in her early 20s when she became pregnant and got married.
My mom was married after she had me. She's been married twice.
Tracy and Elisa's father were young and in love, but it wasn't enough.
She tried really hard to make that marriage work, but they just couldn't make it. They couldn't make it go.
And in 1995, not long after her first divorce, Tracy tried marriage a second time with the same result.
She loved both of her husbands. I know that. It just didn't work out. They just weren't compatible.
Divorced a second time, the single mom worked a series of jobs to support herself and her daughter.
She raised me by herself, full-time working mother, but she tried extra hard, I think, to make sure I didn't miss having another parent.
But Tracy never gave up on her childhood dream. And when her daughter was a teenager, the struggling single mom scraped up the time and money to pursue the next best thing.
She found a way to put the money together to attend the police academy, and she finished in the top 10% of her class.
And in 1998, at the age of 34, Tracy became Oglethorpe County, Georgia's first woman deputy.
She was so excited. She loved the job.
But while she'd finally realized her lifelong dream of a job in law enforcement, there was still one thing missing from Tracy's life: love.
I think she was looking for someone to fill a void that my father left in her heart.
And in the fall of 1999, she made another attempt to fill that void with a welder named Doug Benton. 3 years older than Tracy, Doug Benton was a well-known figure in Madison County.
Doug was a bodybuilder. A lot of people knew Doug because he was such a big guy.
However, the big guy was a bit of a teddy bear, too.
He was an outgoing guy, and he was very friendly.
Doug had started lifting weights at 15, but that wasn't the only habit he picked up as a teenager.
He had started using marijuana when he was 15.
He didn't stop at pot either.
He was a steroid user, like so many people that work out at that level.
He got to be quite an alcoholic and quite a bit of a drug user.
Like Tracy, 20-year-old Doug had a child and married early.
He was married for 10 years, but it wasn't a good marriage. They fought like cats and dogs.
Although, as even his own mother concedes, Doug shouldered his fair share of the blame for the fighting.
He was a mean drunk. He wasn't nice at all. I didn't like him when he was drinking and using drugs.
The divorce, which left his ex with custody of their son, was a wake-up call for Doug.
He decided that he wanted to turn his life around.
And much like Tracy spent her early 30s chasing her long-deferred dream, Doug devoted those years to kicking his drug and alcohol habit.
When he cleaned his act up, he was my son again. It was a mother's prayer answered. It really was.
Although when he first met Tracy at a tanning salon in 1998, he still had a certain bad boy image.
When she first met Doug, he had long hair, he had tattoos.
Which is why when Doug first asked Tracy out, she told him no.
He just didn't seem to be the kind of person that she wanted to be involved with.
Spurred by rejection, Doug took his personal renewal to the next level, so that the next time he ran into Tracy, he made a very different impression.
He was all clean shaven, had his hair cut, and she finally gave in and started going out with him.
And as it turned out, Tracy and Doug had a lot in common.
They loved hunting and shooting and riding motorcycles.
And though Tracy wasn't the competitive bodybuilder Doug was, the rookie deputy was no stranger to the gym.
She loved to stay in shape, and she did lift weights, but it was more of a fitness thing.
Their attraction was more than physical, however.
He called me up, said, "Mom, I really like her." I had never seen him get that excited about another person before.
Tracy was just as smitten with Doug, too.
She told me how much she loved him. She said, "He makes me happy."
She sat me down one time and talked about how things were getting serious with them and they might get married one day and how would I feel about that.
But just as Tracy's personal life was coming together, her professional life started coming apart. In February of 2000, after 16 months on the force, Tracy resigned from her job with the Oglethorpe County Sheriff's Department.
She was not on the best of terms with the sheriff and the higher-ups in that sheriff's office.
And the reasons were spelled out in the claims she made soon after resigning.
There was a sexual harassment claim made regarding the sheriff.
Tracy alleged unequal pay and inappropriate language in the workplace.
One time there were several around and they started a conversation about what color thong she was wearing. You know, pretty off-color comments around her.
Comments that had made her boyfriend, Doug, angry.
There was some bad feelings between Doug and the sheriff.
He didn't like her working down there.
He'd talked her into quitting her job.
And according to Tracy's mother, he'd been the one behind her plans to file a complaint, too.
He thought it was going to be big money.
But would Doug be around to spend it? Coming up, the investigators turn to Tracy.
Perhaps she was the last person to see him.
Could his connection to Tracy and law enforcement explain his disappearance?
There's street talk about him being a snitch.
On June 17, 2000, investigators with the Madison County, Georgia Sheriff's Department were looking into the disappearance of 38-year-old Doug Benton.
We received a call to come out to the residence to look for Mr. Benton. His neighbors were worried because they noticed he had several exotic birds that had died.
Doug's prized birds required daily feeding, and it was unusual for him to leave them neglected.
If he would have went off for a long period of time, he would have had someone to care for him in his absence.
But did that mean something had happened to Doug? The deputies hadn't found anything else out of the ordinary inside the house.
The house seemed to be pretty neat and orderly. Nothing appeared out of place, nothing indicated anything had happened in the home.
So where was Doug Benton?
Every available person we could think of to contact, we'd contact trying to locate him or see if they had heard from him.
One of the first calls was to the woman Doug had been dating for the past 9 months, a former sheriff's deputy from neighboring Oglethorpe County, 35-year-old Tracy Fortson.
When she got the phone, I saw her face and she was upset. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Doug's missing."
While on the phone, Tracy had little to give the investigators, except that she hadn't seen Doug in more than a week. However, Tracy did suggest they call a friend of Doug's named Jeff.
Jeff was a bodybuilder, a friend of his. They lifted weights together.
But when the investigators contacted Jeff, he told them that he hadn't seen Doug in some time, something he blamed on Tracy.
Tracy was jealous of the time that Doug, spent with him.
And Jeff had plenty more to say about Doug's girlfriend.
Jeff told us that Tracy was very demanding and was very jealous.
In fact, Jeff told the investigators that Doug and Tracy's 9-month relationship had been a stormy one.
The general feeling was that she would really get mad at the smallest things. When there was an argument or a fight, that she would just get in her truck and go home.
The relationship between Doug and Tracy was rocky and tumultuous, I think, by most anybody's standards.
Jeff told the investigators that he hadn't seen Doug in more than a week. However, Jeff did say he'd recently seen Doug's truck.
The truck was not in his driveway as usual, but was in the driveway of a neighbor.
Acting on Jeff's tip, the investigators found Doug's truck parked outside a neighbor's house, and the neighbor told them the truck had shown up in his driveway on the morning of June 5th with the keys in the ignition and a note taped to the windshield.
The note said that he would be gone for several days and look after his truck.
The neighbor said Doug hadn't returned for the truck in the past 2 weeks, nor had the neighbor seen him. However, the neighbor with the truck and several others had seen Tracy at Doug's house.
Witnesses saw her going and coming.
Clearly, it was time for the investigators to sit down and talk to Tracy.
I think it would be easy to assume that perhaps she was the last person to see him.
And in addition to that, the investigators were also starting to wonder if what Jeff told them was true. Did Tracy and Doug's volatile relationship have anything to do with his disappearance? Questioned by the investigators, Tracy confirmed at least some of what Doug's friend Jeff had told them, that her relationship with Doug wasn't without drama.
They did have some breakups and they got back together.
Although rather than her storming off in anger the way Jeff made it out, Tracy claimed that their occasional breakups had always been Doug's idea.
Whenever they got into an argument, he would always, tell her to leave him alone, just leave me alone and just give him his space. He'll cool down and come back.
And according to Tracy, she'd always done as Doug asked.
I told her, well, if he wants you to leave him alone, then just do that. If he wants you to be his girlfriend, he will get back together with you.
Tracy said their last big fight had been just days before he disappeared on June 3rd.
They had had an argument over something trivial, and he seemed to be overreacting, like he was madder at her than he should have been for that argument, and he didn't want her there.
But despite the disagreement, Tracy said she'd gone back over to Doug's house the following day, as usual.
She went over there to help him feed the birds.
And according to Tracy, that was the last time she'd seen him.
He was out of sorts and wasn't talking, wasn't saying anything.
And according to what Tracy told the investigators, a few days later, Doug had left her a message on her answering machine.
Tuesday morning, she got the message on her answering machine. Don't come back. Stay away from here. I don't ever want to see you anymore.
At the time, Tracy said she figured it was just Doug being dramatic. And as always, she'd done what Doug asked, which explained why she hadn't talked to him for more than a week.
She said, I feel like he needs his space, so I'm not going to push him,
But at the same time, she wondered, was it more than their usual breakup?
Tracy said that she felt like there was something really going on with him.
It just seemed like it was something bigger.
And now that Doug had disappeared, Tracy said she wondered, was he pushing her away in order to protect her? Long before he started dating a sheriff's deputy, Doug Benton was a well-known figure to law enforcement.
Most of the law enforcement officers around this area knew Doug and knew him personally. I knew him personally.
Not that the bodybuilder had been a troublemaker. Far from it.
He was someone who was, I guess you'd say, friends with the local law enforcement.
Although that friendliness raised suspicions in other parts of the community.
There's a lot of street talk about him being a snitch.
Was it possible that rather than just walk away from his troubled, drug-abusing past, Doug had actually turned informant?
He knew about drugs and the people in the drug business.
According to Doug's mother, it was true.
Doug went to court and testified against a drug dealer that put the drug dealer in prison.
An outcome that provoked a threatening response from the dealer, Doug's mother claimed.
That drug dealer right in court said, you're dead when I get out.
Did that have something to do with Doug's disappearance? Tracy thought it might.
She feared for his life.
And it appeared that Doug had been worried too. About a year before his disappearance, he'd given his mother a videotape that he'd recorded for his son.
He wanted to have that video for his son in case something happened to him.
Exactly what Doug feared, he didn't come out and say.
I just wanted to give him something that he'll be able to remember me by in case something was to happen to me. Never can tell. God never promised you tomorrow. He just promised you today.
But now that he had vanished, was the answer obvious?
He must have been worried about somebody killing him.
Coming up, had Doug's worst fears come true?
They could see that there was a body in there.
But what else will investigators find?
The pathologist did find several stab wounds to the groin.
On Monday, June 19, 2000, 2 days after neighbors reported Tracy Fortson's boyfriend, 38-year-old Doug Benton, missing from his home in rural Madison County, Georgia, A man in neighboring Oglethorpe County noticed something unusual on the farm he managed.
He saw this watering trough, feed trough over in the woods.
The sun was just right and glinted off of that trough and caught his eye.
Curious, he decided to investigate.
He knew that he didn't put it there.
And when he got a little closer, the farm manager started to suspect that a trough wasn't all someone had left out in the woods.
It had a sort of a foul odor to it.
Afraid of what might be causing the odor, the farm manager called 911. But when the investigators arrived, they discovered that the suspicious trough was filled with cement.
So they took a tractor with a hay baler on the front and picked the trough up and dropped it a time or two to crack the cement. And when they did that, they could see that there was a body in there.
Part of his shoulder was exposed, and there was a tattoo there that they could distinctly see.
But whose body was buried in the concrete? Comparing the tattoo against the open missing persons cases led them to a possible identity.
It was known with local law enforcement that this individual was missing, and they had a description of him.
They matched up with Doug Benton.
Doug Benton had been found, and by the end of the day, the trough containing his body was on its way to the crime lab in Atlanta.
That's where they actually chipped away all the concrete and exhumed the body.
But how had he ended up in a concrete-filled trough in the woods? At the scene, investigators found some key clues.
You could see the tire marks.
And near the tire tracks, they found another curious set of marks.
We found a pine tree with very deep, distinct rope marks, rope impressions in the bark.
Connecting those two sets of marks, the investigators were able to piece together a theory of how the heavy trough was dumped in the woods.
A lariat had been tied around the tree and then tied to the end of the watering trough.
And as whoever dumped the body drove away, the rope did its job.
It would have jerked it off of the truck where it was discovered.
But who had hauled Doug Benton's body out to that lonely spot? And exactly how had he died? Back home in Madison County, there were rumors that Doug was a drug informant.
I think he was working undercover with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Was his death possibly payback?
Some drug dealers. One in particular made the statement that when he got out of prison, he was going to kill Doug.
Perhaps the autopsy would provide additional clues. The next morning, the medical examiner's crew carefully chipped the concrete away from Doug's body.
It was pretty well preserved because it was in concrete.
And that preservation made it easier to determine exactly how Doug had died.
He was shot in the top of the head.
The .22 bullet was still in Doug's body. Could it help identify the murder weapon?
The bullet had pancaked so much entering the body, they were not capable of making a sufficient identification to tie it to a particular gun.
So, hoping to find more evidence, Madison County investigators got a warrant and went back to Doug Benton's house to conduct a thorough search. And as soon as they walked in, they discovered something had changed since their initial visit.
There was a strong kerosene smell in the house.
Someone had doused the carpet in the living room with kerosene.
Candles had been placed in different locations.
Somebody wanted to destroy the evidence that may have been in the house.
But the makeshift fuses had failed to ignite the kerosene.
They just fizzled out.
So investigators began an in-depth search to find out what the would-be arsonist had been trying so desperately to hide.
They pulled up the carpet padding and you could see the blood.
Bloodstains around the couch and inside of it.
Once you moved the cushions, you could see that's where the blood had drained.
There was enough blood there to lead us to believe that's where he was murdered.
The deputies had missed it the first time, back when all they were investigating was a missing persons case.
It had been cleaned to the point you would not notice it immediately with the naked eye.
The bloodstains, combined with the fact that Doug had been shot in the top of the head, made it clear to investigators how he had been killed.
Someone was standing almost behind him at the couch while he was asleep, shot him in the top of the head.
But who had pulled the trigger? Was it a hitman, a drug dealer seeking vengeance? Or was it possible that the killer had been someone much closer to Doug? Because while the gunshot to the head was what killed Doug, it wasn't the only injury the autopsy uncovered.
He also had multiple stab wounds.
Wounds in a very particular place, too.
The pathologist did find several stab wounds to the groin.
And according to the pathologist, they appeared to be post-mortem.
That type of genital area mutilation can be indicative of a jilted lover's type thing.
And if it was a jilted lover's thing, that made Tracy a suspect.
Investigation turned towards Tracy due to the fact that she had been in a relationship with Doug.
However, that wasn't the only reason the investigators suspected that the 35-year-old knew more about Doug's disappearance than she'd originally let on. Doug's body had been found in Oglethorpe County, an area Tracy knew well.
She had previously worked as a deputy sheriff in Oglethorpe County.
But the main thing that made Tracy the focus of the investigation came from the farm manager who'd found Doug's body.
Tracy Fortson actually had hunting privileges on the property where the body was found.
I had asked the farm manager, I said, "Do you know Tracy's truck?" And he said, "Yeah, I saw it out here all the time."
The farm manager couldn't recall seeing Tracy's truck on the property recently, but for the investigators, the fact that she was familiar with the property where the body had been found was more than enough to raise suspicion, especially when coupled with what they knew about her relationship with Doug.
Based on some of the interviews that we conducted, it was very obvious they had a hostile relationship.
So not long after Doug's body was found, the investigators brought Tracy in for more questions.
She was much more guarded, much more contentious than in the original interview.
She was not cooperating.
Not that it did much to deter the investigators. On June 21st, 2 days after finding Doug's body, the investigators showed up at Tracy's house with a search warrant.
They searched her house, and it looked like a tornado went through there. They tore up everything.
They found a .22 caliber rifle in the attic. But while it was the same caliber as the gun that killed Doug, the discovery wasn't terribly incriminating all by itself.
She's been in law enforcement, been around guns all her life.
However, the .22 wasn't all the search uncovered.
They found receipts for the concrete and the horse trough.
And the investigators were convinced that the purchases couldn't be a coincidence.
She purchased the trough where the body was found. She purchased the cement that was in the trough where the body was found.
While the investigators searched Tracy's house, she was a few miles away with her daughter, waiting at her parents' house.
Everybody was there and everybody was upset. My mom was sitting on the couch and I was sitting beside her holding her hand and she was crying.
And when the investigators contacted her and asked her to come down to the sheriff's department for another round of questioning, the former deputy could guess what was coming.
She was shocked. We were all shocked. It was like a nightmare.
Everybody that was there started telling my mom bye, hugging her, and they were all crying and telling her bye. She hugged me. She took off her necklace and she gave it to me. And she hugged me again and she whispered in my ear for me to be strong for her.
At the sheriff's department that evening, Tracy invoked her right to remain silent.
She would not talk to law enforcement. She never gave another statement.
Despite that, the receipts they'd found in her house, her connection to the property where Doug's body had been found, and the contentious nature of their relationship gave the authorities plenty to use against her in a court of law. So at 6 that evening, the sheriff's investigators placed Tracy under arrest for the murder of Doug Benton.
They found him dead on Monday, and Tracy was arrested on Wednesday. You ask me, that's a pretty fast investigation.
Coming up, could someone have framed Tracy for murder?
They never even looked at anybody else.
Or will the evidence at trial prove that she killed Doug?
I firmly believe those scratch marks came from that trough.
On July 9, 2001, Tracy Fortson went on trial in the Madison County Courthouse in Danielsville, Georgia. The 36-year-old former sheriff's deputy was charged with the murder of her boyfriend, Doug Benton.
There's no way she could have done that. And I knew right off the bat. I mean, I was only 15, but I still knew that my mom did not kill anybody.
And Tracy's daughter wasn't alone in that belief. The courtroom was packed with people convinced that she was innocent.
Several people didn't want to believe that a female alone could have moved a body the size of Doug's by herself.
But in his opening statement, the prosecutor argued that Tracy killed Doug after an argument and that the evidence would prove it.
He was sleeping on the couch or dozing on the couch, and she came up and put a .22 rifle to the head and shot him.
And then, not satisfied with merely shooting her boyfriend, she'd stabbed him repeatedly in the genitals.
The stab wounds would make it very personal.
And the prosecution claimed that once Doug was dead, it was
rope.
He created a plausible scenario for how she might have done that.
But did that mean it was true? Despite the fact that the investigators had found a .22 caliber rifle at Tracy's house, they couldn't prove it was the murder weapon.
The best anybody could say about the bullet ballistically was that it could have been fired from a gun she had.
The cement-filled trough that Doug's body had been dumped in was easy to tie to Tracy, though, thanks to the receipts the investigators had found in her kitchen.
Tracy was stuck with the fact that she purchased the cement and the trough.
And according to the prosecution, she'd done more than purchase them. On the stand, the investigators testified that when they impounded Tracy's truck, they'd made yet another discovery that pointed to her as Doug's killer.
When we processed Tracy Fortson's vehicle for evidence, in the bed of her truck, there were cement splatters everywhere.
There were actually slosh marks from putting the concrete in the watering trough and stirring it.
And based on the pattern of those spatters, the investigators were convinced the trough had been in the back of Tracy's truck when Doug was entombed in concrete.
There was a void area in the back of the truck where the watering trough would have been,
which was consistent with the measurements on that trough.
And according to the investigators, there were a series of fresh scratches in the bed of Tracy's truck, too.
I firmly believe those scratch marks came from that trough when it was slid with all that weight in it out of that truck.
And if that wasn't enough, the prosecutors had one more piece of evidence for the jury: the note left on Doug's truck.
It wasn't Doug's handwriting.
But the prosecutor couldn't prove that Tracy had written it.
Our analysts said it was obviously written to disguise the handwriting.
Though there was something about the note that did point to the former deputy sheriff.
The note was taped onto the window with tape that is commonly used in processing crime scenes and lifting latent fingerprints.
It was compelling evidence. But was it enough to prove that Tracy had killed her boyfriend? Not according to the defense.
It just seemed like everything they had on her was circumstantial.
The defense also pointed out that Tracy had nothing to gain from killing Doug.
They never came up with a motive.
Plus, since Tracy had worked in law enforcement, wouldn't she know better than to use the fingerprint tape or leave evidence lying around, much less the murder weapon?
I don't believe any police officer would keep a gun after they murdered somebody. If Tracy had killed that guy, that gun would be in the ocean. It would be in a quarry. It would not be where the Madison County Sheriff's Department could find it.
In fact, the evidence Tracy had allegedly left lying around after the crime was even enough to give Doug's mother pause.
You don't leave evidence of a crime you've committed right out in plain view for everybody to discover in your house. To me, that points to innocence.
And as for where the killer dumped Doug's body, the defense asked the jury to consider whether a veteran law enforcement officer, one who'd graduated the academy at the top of her class, would make such a rookie mistake.
Tracy would not have left a body on land that everybody in the county knows she hunts on. That would lead it back to her.
Still, Tracy had bought a trough and concrete.
There was no attempt whatsoever to cover up the fact she had bought these items.
According to the defense, there was no attempt to cover up the purchases because there were perfectly innocent explanations for both.
She kept a horse just down the road from our house.
Tracy had been talking about pouring a cement pad for her dog kennel.
That was my idea, for her to build a pad for her dog.
And the defense claimed that when she'd brought the trough and cement home, she'd left them both outside.
It looked like it was going to rain, so she unloaded the trough and the concrete bags into her carport.
But then, a few days later,
when she got home, everything was gone, that trough, the cement, everything.
At the time, Tracy had blamed the disappearance on Doug.
She thought Doug had taken it as some, little lover spat thing, that he was sort of childish like that and he would take her stuff.
But since Doug was dead, the defense suggested that the real killer had stolen the cement and the trough.
There could be somebody else that committed the murder.
Was it possible Tracy had been framed?
The man had been sentenced to some prison time based upon the help or cooperation of Doug Benton and swore to get him later.
He was out at the time of Doug's death.
Yet, according to the defense, the investigators had never really considered him a suspect.
I don't believe they really ever had any interest in pursuing that.
They never even looked at anybody else.
Would it be enough to raise reasonable doubt, despite the fact that Tracy never took the stand?
Tracy did not testify. She was advised not to.
The answer came on July 12th, when the jury delivered its verdict.
The verdict was guilty of murder and guilty of attempted arson.
She was just stunned. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. None of us could.
Coming up, is Tracy's verdict justice?
It just breaks my heart. It's another victim.
Or will she get a second chance?
The Supreme Court of Georgia agreed.
By March of 2004, it had been almost 3 years since a Georgia jury had found Tracy Fortson guilty of murdering her boyfriend, Doug Benton.
When they found her guilty, I went to pieces. I lost it. My husband had to practically drag me out of the courthouse.
Tracy's mother wasn't the only one upset by the outcome either. Even Doug's mom had her doubts.
I didn't feel satisfied because I had a lot of questions.
And as it turned out, so did the Georgia Supreme Court. After her conviction, Tracy appealed on the grounds that her defense had been inadequate.
The Supreme Court of Georgia agreed with her appeal and reversed the conviction.
The case was overturned on ineffective assistance of defense counsel during the jury selection.
So on March 22, 2004, Tracy went on trial a second time in an entirely different courtroom.
It was tried the second time in Effingham County, which is right there at Savannah on the coast.
We thought that that would be good, since it wasn't local.
And unlike the first trial, this time the 39-year-old took the stand in her own defense.
She was a good witness.
But would Tracy's testimony make the difference?
She was convicted again.
I couldn't believe it.
It was just the same thing all over again. It's devastation.
The judge sentenced Tracy to life in prison. But her friends and family remain convinced that she is innocent.
I know Tracy's not guilty because I grew up with her. I know how she is. There's no way that Tracy did this.
I thought it was a miscarriage of justice. I think the whole affair is a miscarriage of justice.
Not just the trial, either. They doubt the entire investigation.
Somebody decided that she should pay for this crime, and they made it happen. They just pointed the finger at her and said she did it, and that was it.
And why would the investigators do that? Some suspect that Tracy's allegations of sexual harassment against the Oglethorpe County Sheriff's Department had something to do with it.
They don't like being sued. And that would give them reason to be very pleased for Tracy to go to jail.
Though the idea that Tracy's complaints about the sheriff influenced the investigation may seem far-fetched, even Doug's mother remains convinced that Tracy didn't kill her son.
It does me no good to lose a son and then think somebody that didn't shoot him is serving time in prison. It just breaks my heart. It's another victim.
That was amazing. I love this.
He had 2 houses. One was a floating home. One was just on the bank there. And I remember regularly working on a house and just being awestruck. Like, how do you attain these properties? These statements paint a picture of a man who found genuine joy in his achievements and shared that joy freely with those he loved. Jimmy seemed like he was happy, a sentiment reinforced by the observation that he was, at his core, a selfless person. His vision for A1 Hawk transcended mere commerce and profit. He wanted it to be known that A1 Hawk wasn't like other pawn shops and to break the stigma behind most standard corporate pawn shops. He sought to imbue his business with a sense of integrity, community, and personal service, distinguishing it from larger, more impersonal corporations. But this portrait of a doting grandfather and an astute, successful entrepreneur was now cruelly shattered, brutally interrupted. He had been found dead inside his sprawling riverfront mansion, and investigators are trying to determine why. The stark contrast between the vibrant, successful life he lived and its violent, ignoble end presented a deeply disturbing enigma, one that investigators were now painstakingly attempting to solve, meticulously sifting through the wreckage of a life senselessly taken. The initial absence of key evidence at the immediate crime scene immediately directed the investigative team toward specific, damning conclusions, steering them away from less likely scenarios. There was no firearm located anywhere. There was no shell casing located anywhere. These facts were fundamental, forming an irrefutable foundation for their initial assessment. A victim with a fatal gunshot wound, yet no weapon present, pointed unequivocally away from suicide. So that led us to believe that, well, one, he couldn't have killed himself. The logical progression was undeniable, leaving homicide as the only viable explanation. Furthermore, another seemingly innocuous detail began to gather significance. A small clue that hinted at clandestine company. They did find 2 drink cups in the bedroom that most people don't drink out of 2 different glasses of the same type of drink. This strongly suggested the undeniable presence of a second person there, an unseen companion whose existence was now a crucial investigative thread, a silent, damning witness to the events leading up to the murder. The path toward identifying this mysterious second party, and potentially the perpetrator, began with a seemingly small but profoundly impactful discovery, a stroke of investigative luck. One of the detectives went into the bathroom and found some prescriptions with the name Talia. McDaniel. This was a name and a clue that would echo through the initial phase of the investigation. The juxtaposition of the victim's relaxed, vulnerable state. He had his underwear and his socks on the floor, and I think he had his shirt draped over at the edge of the bed, so it appeared as though he had disrobed and gotten into bed, with a violent outcome. Strongly suggested an intimate connection. The killer, it seemed, was not a stranger forcing their way in, but someone welcomed, someone familiar, invited into Jimmy Pearson's private, trusted space. It was very likely that the person that killed him was someone that was familiar to him. This line of reasoning was further bolstered by the unsettling absence of any sign of conflict or defensive wounds, and it didn't appear there was any struggle. It didn't look like Mr. Pearson saw it coming. The scene painted a chilling picture of an ambush, an act of ultimate betrayal from an unexpected quarter, a trust brutally violated. The investigation was now turning toward an old flame, Talia McDaniel, who was rapidly becoming a person of interest, shrouded in the shadows of suspicion. The narrative was gaining momentum, pointing toward a past relationship, potentially marked by a falling out where money and possessions were taken. This was not merely an intuition. Detectives would soon gain access to a crucial piece of evidence, one that provided a dispassionate, digital record of events. As we were looking through the ring footage on Mr. Pearson's phone, we found a female getting out of the vehicle and coming to the front door. The digital eye of technology was about to speak with a damning clarity. Following the thorough search of 63-year-old Jimmy Pearson's ransacked bedroom, detectives in Oregon quickly formed a strong suspicion. He had likely been robbed and murdered within the perceived sanctuary of his own home. The motivation, it seemed, appeared unequivocally financial, a cold, calculating act rooted in avarice rather than personal vendetta. We were aware that he had owned A1 Hawk Pond locations, and so the belief that because he was the owner of these locations that he would potentially have jewelry or cash on hand. This knowledge, deeply ingrained in the local community due to Jimmy's entrepreneurial success, coupled with the clear evidence of pervasive disruption and theft throughout the residence, it surely looked like somebody had gone through a lot of Mr. Pearson's possessions, fortified there. Working theory of a robbery-homicide. It was not merely violence, but violence as a means to an end, that end being illicit gain. In an age increasingly defined by omnipresent surveillance and digital interconnectedness, a key piece of modern technology offered a beacon of hope, a potential eyewitness without biases or selective memory. When we noticed that he had the Rain camera outside the front, we knew that it was likely going to capture whoever killed him. The logic was irrefutable, a foundational principle of modern forensic investigation. If they came into the front door, we'd be able to see who did it and at what time the homicide occurred. This external digital eye, positioned to guard the home, promised to be an impartial witness, a silent sentinel recording the very moment the crime intersected with Jimmy Pearson's life. However, gaining immediate access to this vital footage was not without its procedural and technical challenges. We needed to gain access to Mr. Pearson's cell phone to gain access to the cameras. The immediate hurdle presented itself in the form of digital security. The issue was that the phone had a pass lock, so we couldn't get into the phone. So that was a little bit of a challenge. This momentary barrier highlighted the frustrating yet common complexities of digital evidence, requiring time and appropriate legal authority to circumvent. While the forensic team meticulously processed the interior of the opulent home, collecting samples and documenting the scene with painstaking detail. 3 of Jimmy's associates had gathered in the driveway, their presence a mixture of shock, grief, and a genuine, if somewhat chaotic, desire to help. Mr. Morrell, the initial caller, explained his immediate actions after the harrowing discovery. Mr. Merrill told us that after calling 911, he then called Mr. Pearson's attorney. It was paralegal, and they both came to the scene. Their rapid response, while understandable from the perspective of concern, meant they had been in close proximity to the perimeter of the crime scene, necessitating careful questioning to establish what they saw, heard, and touched, and, perhaps more importantly, what they didn't. Detectives stepped outside to engage with them, commencing with Tony Morrell, patiently requesting him to recount the timeline of his actions. Mr. Morrell recounted his long-standing personal and professional relationship with the victim. He indicated that he had known Mr. Pearson for well over 20 years. His narrative regarding the last confirmed sighting and interaction with Jimmy Pearson was clear and sequential. They had gone to casino. They had spent some time up there, gambling, eating. The atmosphere, then, was one of casual enjoyment and recreation, typical of 2 friends sharing leisure time. It was in the early morning hours on February 27th that Mr. Merrill left Mr. Pearson at the casino. That precise moment marked their final known communication, their paths diverging under seemingly innocuous circumstances. He said that was the last time that he had communicated with Mr. Pearson. The following days were punctuated by an escalating unease for Tony. On March 3rd, he found it odd that he still hadn't heard from Mr. Pearson, and actually nobody had heard from him in a couple days. This growing, nagging concern ultimately prompted his decisive action to perform a welfare check. So Mr. Merrill decided he wanted to go inside and check to see if Mr. Pearson was okay. His method of entry, via access to garage code, suggested a trusted relationship, granting him unimpeded passage. Once inside, the first indication of something amiss concerned Mr. Pearson's dog, a loyal companion who had clearly been neglected. He noticed that the dog food dish was empty, water bowl was empty. His compassionate response. He took care of the dog, fed water, took it out potty, revealed his genuine affection for his friend and his friend's pet. A small act of kindness preceding the horrifying discovery in the master bedroom that would shatter his world. After Tony Morrell concluded his detailing of the grim events, meticulously recalling the hours leading up to finding his deceased friend, detectives then turned their undivided attention to Jimmy's attorney, seeking deeper insights into the victim's complex personal history and potential adversaries. I was asking him a myriad of questions about Mr. Pearson's past and about who would want to harm him, exploring the full spectrum of Jimmy's relationships and dealings. The attorney's responses, while perhaps cautious and legally phrased, did provide significant, albeit potentially unsettling, information that painted a clearer picture of internal familial discord, although he didn't try to throw shade, meaning he wasn't intentionally attempting to cast suspicion. He indicated that there was a bit of a falling out between Mr. Pearson and his daughters over Mr. Pearson's personal life, this familial friction, especially concerning a figure of Mr. Pearson's substantial financial standing, instantly flagged a traditional motive for detectives, internal conflict within the family, potentially over inheritance. The attorney's long association with Jimmy Pearson was firmly established. He had known Mr. Pearson for a long time. They had become friends. More critically, he now served as his wills and estates lawyer and had written a will for him recently. And it was in the astonishing details of this recent legal document that a truly shocking revelation emerged, a deviation from conventional familial expectations, in which he had essentially disinherited his 2 daughters. The attorney physically presented this amended will to the investigators, allowing them to review the legal document firsthand. He handed me his amended will that had just happened within a couple of months prior to that. which to me was a little odd, the detective reflected, recognizing the peculiar timing of such a significant alteration. Mr. Pearson, the attorney explained, had chosen to leave his considerable fortune to himself and another friend, a stark deviation from the expected familial legacy that often motivates legal challenges or, in more extreme cases, criminal acts. Despite the immediate suspicion that such a substantial financial shift might cast upon the attorney, especially given the timing of their introduction, the detectives ultimately concluded otherwise. Although it was suspicious how we were introduced, their cooperation led us to believe that this attorney didn't have anything to do with it. Their unwavering willingness to assist in every requested capacity, with transparent alacrity, proved their genuine intent and removed them from the immediate pool of suspects. Anything that we needed or requested, they were quick to help us with. With the question of the controversial will and its immediate implications momentarily addressed, a more pressing, technical challenge remained to unlock further digital evidence, gaining access to Jimmy Pearson's phone. The paralegal, however, proved instrumental in providing this crucial key. We asked her, because she knew a lot of Mr. Pearson's affairs, "Do you know what Mr. Pearson's passcode is?" Her initial response was a blank, reflecting a lack of immediate knowledge. And at first she stated nobody. But after a moment's thought, a possibility surfaced, a glimmer of hope. She said, "I might be able to locate it." This glimmer of digital accessibility was critical. She then offered another relevant piece of information, inadvertently providing a potential last eyewitness before the crime. She said one of the people that had asked Mr. Pearson's house was Mr. Pearson's housekeeper and would come every Monday. Given that it was currently a Wednesday, we knew that Monday had just happened. This established a valuable window, pinpointing an individual who had been in the residence most recently before the grim discovery, a potential silent witness to initial activities. Investigators wasted no time. A call was swiftly placed to the housekeeper, in the hopeful anticipation that she might have seen something or heard anything unusual during her visit, however mundane. Her testimony, carefully recounted and cross-referenced, proved to be a goldmine of subtle, yet critical, details. She confirmed her presence at the residence between the hours of 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. on the preceding Monday, the day closest to the estimated time of death. Her method of entry was standard and authorized. She said she entered the residence through the front door. She possessed a key to Mr. Pearson, provided her, establishing a relationship of trust. What she encountered inside, however, offered a perplexing element to the growing puzzle. She heard loud music coming from the direction of Mr. Pearson's room. This seemed to suggest an ongoing activity, perhaps Mr. Pearson entertaining, or simply enjoying his solitude, preventing a clear audio assessment of any ongoing activity. She then went to go check on Mr. Pearson over the door and saw his feet. The casual observation, interpreted in that innocent moment, was that he was merely resting. Thought, "Oh, he's asleep. I don't want to bother him." Out of deference and professional courtesy, she's the one that actually shut the door. She then proceeded, unaware of the lurking horror, with her regular duties, and she proceeded to clean the residence, leaving the murder scene untouched but unaware of the tragedy unfolding. Upon questioning about any irregularities or anything that struck her as odd or out of place or unusual, her initial recollection, while seemingly minor, immediately piqued the detective's professional interest, like a faint signal on a radar screen. The first thing she told me was, "Hey, you know what? When I was folding clothing, I noticed that there was some women's clothing that I was folding." This observation, a stray detail from a routine chore, would have been entirely unremarkable had it been a frequent occurrence in Jimmy Pearson's home. But the housekeeper added a crucial temporal context that electrified the investigative team. Mr. Pearson's housekeeper says it used to be a common occurrence back when he was dating a woman named Tylia McDaniel. The past tense, however, was significant, signaling a change in household dynamics. And when Talia was living with Mr. Pearson, it was very common to see her clothing amongst Mr. Pearson's in the dryer. The kicker, the truly compelling piece of information, was the elapsed time since that prior relationship, but that had been about a year prior. The reappearance of women's clothing after a year-long hiatus pointed directly back to the name already discovered by detectives on the prescription bottles. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered, were beginning to align. To the detectives, the name Talia McDaniel now resonated with disquieting familiarity, a faint yet persistent alarm bell in their periphery. It was, after all, the same name they had seen on prescription bottles that had belonged to a woman named Talia McDaniel, found in the victim's bathroom, a specific detail that screamed of recent presence. The confluence of these specific clues, a past intimate relationship, the recent discovery of her clothing, and her personal prescriptions at the scene of a murder instantly flagged her as a significant individual of interest. Detectives now shifted their immediate focus and primary objective to track down Ms. McDaniel to determine if she had a motive to harm Jimmy Pearson. The logical deduction was becoming stark, forming a compelling initial hypothesis. Obviously, that was a name that popped into our periphery as potentially being involved in this. Further investigative checks solidified the suspicion into something more concrete. So, when we looked up Mr. Pearson's name, we did find a report where he had claims it. He'd been the victim of a burglary. The victim himself, in a prior police report, had identified his then-girlfriend. He had listed Talia McDaniel as stealing from him. The convergence of these details, a past tumultuous relationship, the presence of her clothing and prescriptions, and a prior reported theft from the victim, solidified Talia McDaniel's position, and we started to believe that that may be who we needed to find, a person with a clear motive and a history of conflict with the deceased. The day after the gruesome discovery of Jimmy Pearson's body, the investigative net expanded to include his immediate family, specifically his two daughters, Sarah and Tanya Pearson. Their interview began with an outpouring of raw, visceral emotion, painting a profoundly painful picture of grief and disbelief. They said they believed that he was murdered. Their emotional state was profound, almost overwhelming, and that was, can you say the feeling? There were so many feelings, they didn't even believe it. Such an overwhelming tsunami of sorrow often manifests as a form of non-refusal to accept a horrific reality, a psychological defense mechanism against incomprehensible tragedy. The detectives, while empathizing deeply with the profound loss, had to proceed with their duty, systematically gathering information. I asked them questions about, can you tell me about your dad? Tell me about your dad's dealings, who he associated with. Their responses conveyed an almost universally positive sentiment about their father, echoing the broader portrait of a well-liked, charismatic man. Everybody loved Dad. Nobody hates Dad, they insisted, speaking from the heart of their own adoration. However, their interview also proved enlightening in a more complex, nuanced manner, providing crucial context regarding the fallout with their father, the strained family dynamics previously hinted at by the attorney, and a lot of it had to do with the people he was keeping company with. Specifically, their concern centered around his romantic life. They didn't like the females that he was around. Their suspicions were candid, painting a picture of challenging and often uncomfortably explicit dynamic within their father's bachelor's lifestyle. They described as their feelings where they were potentially escorts. This immediately resonated with the information linking the name Talia McDaniel to Jimmy Pearson. Sarah, in particular, connected the dots to their father's personal choices. The only person that came to my mind was Talia. She recounted the early days of their father's relationship with Talia, a story already tinged with familial skepticism and discomfort. We started dating a young woman, and I believe she was around 20 years old. The daughter's concern wasn't just about the significant age gap, but the suspicious circumstances of their meeting and Tylia's apparent lack of financial stability. We would ask, "How did you guys meet?" She said was like, "In the movie, we were at a grocery store and carts hit, and then he got my number." This idyllic, romanticized narrative, however, sharply contrasted with the stark realities of Tylia's apparent life. She didn't have a job, didn't have a car, didn't have driver's license. She had nothing. Sarah's internal struggle, balancing politeness with protective concern, was palpable. Whether she was nice, great, she's nice. But you're going to invite this person into your home, into your business. The daughter's concern was that she was a bad influence on Mr. Pearson, and that kind of wasn't the type of grandfather that they wanted their children to be around. This ethical and moral divide ultimately led to a professional and personal rift. As a result, Sarah quit working at the pawn shop, a significant decision reflecting the depth of her discomfort, her suspicions about Tylia, fueled by the unsettling realities of the relationship and their father's increasingly wild lifestyle intensified over time. I found out about a month later that my dad thought she took off with a whole bunch of cash and valuables at his house. This startling revelation aligned perfectly with the investigative findings regarding the earlier burglary report tied to Tylia. There was a report of a theft from his house about a year ago. That case was reported, but no charges were ever filed. The financial entanglement, coupled with the profound familial disapproval, painted a compelling picture of a volatile relationship, ending not just in a breakup, but in alleged criminality. After this alleged robbery, Jimmy, recognizing the breach of trust and the financial exploitation, definitively broke off the relationship with Tylia, severing the immediate tie that had caused so much discord and familial tension. However, the existing rift between him and his daughters continued to grow, exacerbated by their divergent expectations for his personal life. This ongoing friction stemmed primarily from Jimmy's strong desire for personal autonomy and his deeply ingrained independent spirit. It had to do with Jimmy feeling like they were trying to take over his life and tell him what to do. His personality, shaped by a lifetime of self-reliance, hard work, and previous struggles, chafed at perceived interference in his choices. He enjoyed his life, he enjoyed partying, and wasn't going to listen to his daughters try and convince them otherwise. He was, in essence, a free spirit, determined to live life on his own terms. Despite these deep-seated problems and the emotional distance, Sarah and Tanya made a crucial, consistent statement to detectives. They were unaware their father had written him out his will. This was a significant piece of information, as a prior awareness would have instantly placed them under intense scrutiny and given them a clear, immediate financial motive. They anticipated a formal legal process regarding their inheritance. They said that we would be getting a call from his lawyer, and they would be reading his testimony. For them, the overwhelming, crushing reality remained the senseless loss of their father. When it rains, it pours, and there were so many questions, but my only question was, what happened to my dad? Their emotional anguish was palpable, stripped down to its most fundamental question. On that very day, concurrent with the emotionally charged family interviews, the medical examiner conducted a thorough autopsy, providing the grim, unequivocal answer that would guide the entire trajectory of the investigation, moving it from hypothesis to confirmed fact. The autopsy report confirmed, with scientific certainty, the nature of Jimmy Pearson's death. It was determined that Mr. Pearson was shot once in the back of the head. This precise finding was critical, dispelling any residual ambiguity about the cause of death. The meticulous work of forensic pathology further specified the weapon type involved. Ebola was removed and was identified as a .38 special slug. This concrete finding, a .38 special slug, shifted the investigation from broad possibilities to a very specific weapon type, dramatically narrowing the search parameters and giving detectives a tangible lead. They were looking for a .38 caliber firearm. Now that Jimmy's exact cause of death was confirmed beyond doubt, investigators were filled with a renewed sense of urgency, eager to track down the person who pulled the trigger, knowing precisely what kind of weapon they were likely seeking. The seemingly insurmountable challenge of Mr. Pearson's phone lock was finally overcome, thanks to the paralegal's resourcefulness and intimate knowledge of his affairs. This paralegal, she contacted us, provided us a passcode, and we entered it. Thankfully, it unlocked his phone. The ability to bypass this digital barrier was a monumental step forward, granting detectives unprecedented access to Jimmy Pearson's most private digital world. We were able to gain access to Mr. Pearson's text messages and also the Ring camera app. These digital artifacts held the undeniable potential to reveal not only the identity of the perpetrator, but also the very sequence of events leading to the murder, providing a timeline more accurate than any human recollection. However, the initial expectation of finding damning messages from Talia McDaniel, the current primary person of interest, was quickly overturned by the digital records. But none of the messages are from Talia. This absence in itself was a significant finding, as it began to redirect the focus of the investigation, systematically eliminating one hypothesis to narrow down others. Instead, the final red message was from Paris Royal Natasha. The intriguing pseudonym immediately caught the detective's attention, a flag in the digital landscape. The content of these messages, while not explicitly incriminating, painted a vivid, unmistakable picture of the victim's activities in his final hours, confirming his bachelor's lifestyle. It looked as if he had engaged with somebody to essentially set up a date for someone to come to his house. The interaction was characterized by the logistics of an impending rendezvous. There was an exchange of messages of, "Are you here?" or "How far out are you?" essentially. Furthermore, previous messages in the conversation spell out the nature of the relationship with unsettling clarity. The underlying purpose was unmistakable, defined by a clear transactional basis. Those messages were very clearly talking about money and them getting together and exchanging money for the time they spent together. This led to an undeniable conclusion for the experienced investigators, which led us to believe that he was paying for her services as an escort. Jimmy Pearson, a man who, as his daughters indicated, enjoyed his life. He enjoyed partying, was leading a vibrant, if sometimes risky, bachelor's lifestyle, and that lifestyle, tragically, had placed him in contact with dangerous individuals. The Ring doorbell footage, now seamlessly accessible through Jimmy Pearson's unlocked phone, corroborated and amplified the insights gleaned from the text messages, providing crucial visual confirmation. As we were looking through the Ring footage, we found a vehicle arriving at his house and a female getting out of the vehicle and coming to the front door. This visual confirmation provided undeniable proof of the mystery woman's physical presence at the residence around the estimated time of the murder. Crucially and decisively, the woman captured by the camera was distinctly not Talia McDaniel. Investigators are uncertain who the woman arriving is, but one thing is clear: she is not Talia McDaniel. The differences between the individual in the footage and the known appearance of Talia were apparent and definitive. They're two different size people. They look very different, and it was clear that that was not who we were looking at. This stark visual evidence effectively eliminated Talia McDaniel from being the direct perpetrator of this particular crime, removing her from the primary suspect list. Ms. McDaniel was no longer really on our radar as the immediate prime suspect, marking a decisive pivot in the ongoing investigation. The focus shifted, now intensely concentrated on Paris Royal Natasha, with Talia McDaniel demonstrably out of the picture as the immediate perpetrator. The full focus of the investigative team narrowed onto the intriguing alias, Paris Royal Natasha, a name that immediately triggered professional suspicion due to its theatrical, almost performative quality. Paris Royal Natasha, that's not a typical name that we tend to hear. so we had a feeling that that was likely not a real name. This shrewd observation redirected their efforts from a moniker to the underlying digital breadcrumbs, the verifiable data that would unmask the true identity. So one of the things that we did was we did a search, a law enforcement search of the phone number itself, using specialized tools and databases to cross-reference the number with official records. This crucial technical step bore fruit almost immediately, providing the break they needed. We were able to associate that phone number with Natasha Rose Tate. This confirmed the individual's true identity, providing a tangible, verifiable link to a real person, a critical shift from alias to concrete suspect. The next step was definitive visual confirmation, eliminating any remaining doubt. We utilized her driver license photo, which we were able to use to compare to the person we saw in the Ring camera video. The match was positive and definitive, securing a solid identification. The video footage from the Ring camera meticulously captured Natasha Tate's arrival and her subsequent revealing departure, offering an unvarnished timeline of her activities at Jimmy Pearson's home. She was wearing like a dark-colored sweatshirt and jeans, and was carrying a bag with her. Her approach to the house was direct and unhesitating. When she went to the door, Mr. Pearson greeted her, and then they went inside. The initial contact appeared amicable, fitting the narrative of an arranged date for escort services, betraying no signs of overt hostility or immediate danger. The timeline was now being meticulously constructed by detectives, minute by painstaking minute. After an interval of 2 hours later, around 2:42 a.m., the footage shows Natasha leaving the home. But her departure was markedly different from her arrival, imbued with a telling change in demeanor and possessions. She comes back out and has the same red duffel bag in her hand, and it appears to be extremely full and heavy. The contents had clearly changed dramatically, now laden with substantial weight. Moreover, a critical visual detail emerged. In her right hand, it looks like she has maybe some reusable shopping bags or something else. Not items that she had originally shown up with, but things that came from inside the home. This strongly suggested an emptying of the victim's valuable possessions, rather than merely her own belongings. The brazenness of her actions was further underscored by multiple trips back and forth from the house to her vehicle. She makes several trips of carrying bags and boxes to her vehicle, put things in the vehicle. Another chilling and highly incriminating detail emerged from careful frame-by-frame analysis. It appeared she was wearing gloves, which was odd. The deliberate use of gloves indicated a premeditated attempt to avoid leaving forensic evidence at the crime scene, a stark departure from the typical, spontaneous crime of passion, suggesting a calculated effort to conceal her involvement. The meticulousness of her removal of items, the deliberate plunder, perfectly aligned with the initial chaotic crime scene. It was very clear that by little condition we found the house. It looked like it had been ransacked. This confirmed the dual nature of the crime, not just murder, but also a thorough and methodical robbery designed for maximum financial gain. Then, Natasha was looking for any value she could sell. The motivation of pure greed, unvarnished and ruthless, became painfully apparent as the overriding driver of her actions. This appears suspicious given the larger context of finding Mr. Pearson deceased. A detective understated with dry wit, highlighting the obvious connection. At this critical juncture, with Natasha Tate firmly established as the prime suspect. At that point, we're attempting to develop as much information about her as possible. Who is she? Are there any law enforcement contacts in the area with her? The chase was now truly on, fueled by digital evidence and the ticking clock of a fugitive. A routine search of police records for Natasha Tate's name, a standard procedure once an identity is established, yielded an immediate and profound hit, a truly serendipitous piece of information that bordered on the miraculous for the investigation. She had been involved in a traffic stop 12 minutes after leaving Mr. Pearson's home. The timing of the seemingly innocuous, routine traffic stop was nothing short of extraordinary for the homicide case, providing an almost instant, tangible connection between the suspect, a weapon, and the immediate aftermath of the murder. The details documented in the traffic stop report were even more compelling, adding layers of damning evidence. The officer noted that there was a purse that was open on the front passenger seat of Nastasia's car and that there was a revolver handgun that was sitting in plain view. This was no hidden weapon. It was openly displayed, casually abandoned, perhaps in haste or a temporary lapse of caution, creating an unavoidable record. Her explanation for its possession, when questioned by the patrol officer, was convoluted and dubious. She explained she was in possession of the gun because she took it from a friend, and that's not legal to transfer a firearm. Recognizing the irregularity of the firearm's presence and its undocumented transfer, the firearm was seized and placed into evidence by Milwaukee police. A crucial piece of physical evidence removed from circulation and documented in official channels. Crucially, at the time of the traffic stop, based on the information available to the patrol officer, there was no reason to detain her for that specific infraction alone, and she was allowed to go free, unaware of the grim destiny that awaited her. However, to the homicide detectives now reviewing these cold, stark records, dissecting every detail of the patrol officer's report, the implications were searingly clear, forming an almost irrefutable chain of evidence. A .38 caliber revolver found openly in Natasha Tate's car, a mere 12 minutes after she was captured by the Ring camera footage leaving Jimmy Pearson's home, where he lay dead from a bullet, identified as a .38 Special Slug. The two pieces of information, separated by only days of time, but united by cold hard facts, fit together with horrifying precision, forming an unmistakable pattern. Knowing that Officer Sanchez had seized a .38 caliber revolver from Nastasia the prior night, that immediately led me to believe that that was like their murder weapon. The logical jump, while still requiring forensic confirmation, was instantaneous and profound, marking the definitive moment where suspicion hardened into near certainty, transforming Nastasia Tate from a person of interest into the primary, undeniable suspect. However, the clock was ticking, and with it, the critical element of time and distance. Now, the suspect has about a 2-day leave on law enforcement, so they need to make up 2 days very quickly, because the longer this goes on, the more difficult it is they're going to be able to find it. The initial challenge of uncertainty had been replaced by the urgent imperative of pursuit, a race against the ever-increasing lead of a likely fugitive. Less than 48 hours into their relentless and meticulous investigation, homicide detectives had achieved what many could only dream of, a triumph of systematic deduction and swift action. They had zeroed in on a concrete suspect in the brutal murder of Jimmy Pearson, an apparent escort named Nastasia Tate. The confluence of powerful digital evidence from the victim's phone and the Ring camera footage, combined with the incredibly timely and crucial detail of the traffic stop and the seized .38 caliber revolver, presented an almost airtight preliminary case, a robust foundation for an arrest. The next critical step, essential for irrefutable judicial proof, was to secure forensic confirmation of the weapon. They send the evidence gathered so far for forensic testing. We submitted the jacketed bullet that was recovered from Mr. Pearson's head. We submitted the firearm. The ballistics results would either cement their theory with scientific certainty or, against all odds, send them back to square one. However, all indicators pointed overwhelmingly towards a definitive, conclusive match. Simultaneously, police swiftly and legally obtained an arrest warrant for Nastasia, transforming her status from suspect to wanted fugitive and setting the stage for a desperate, cross-country manhunt. But Nastasia Tate proved to be an elusive quarry, demonstrating a practiced ability to evade detection and disappear into the labyrinthine anonymity of modern transit life. The phone numbers that we had previously for her, we knew were no longer good. She was no longer using a classic tactic of a seasoned runner. Her professional background, working as an exotic dancer at a couple different nightclubs, gentlemen's clubs, suggested a lifestyle that required a certain fluidity and anonymity, making her particularly difficult to track through conventional means. Detectives diligently had detectives go to those different locations to see if we could find her. Vehicle, the Mercedes, a key identifier from the ring footage, now known to be a recent acquisition, an object of her stated desire for shiny things. Alas, unfortunately, her vehicle was not found at any of those places. The investigation now faced its primary, urgent focus, distilled to a single, critical question. So that became the primary focus of this investigation, is where is she at? The sheer scope of modern connectivity, however, would ultimately prove to be her undoing, a double-edged sword for those who attempt to live in the shadows. Social media being such a large part of pretty much everybody's lives these days, detectives expertly leverage this ubiquitous digital landscape, knowing that even the most careful fugitives often leave digital breadcrumbs. They were able to locate not only her escort page, but her private social media page, a window into both her professional and personal existence. These digital artifacts offered invaluable insights into Nastasha's life and, crucially, into her immediate concerns and plans. Intriguingly, her personal account indicated that even her own family members were expressing worry about her sudden disappearance, a subtle but significant sign that her flight was unusual even for her transient life. One of the messages was left by her grandmother that said something similar to "what the heck? We were all very worried about you." This message became a crucial portal, opening a direct line to her closest kin, a desperate appeal for her whereabouts that could be exploited by law enforcement. When investigators reached out to the worried grandmother, she proved instrumental, providing the familial link they desperately needed, ultimately connecting them in touch with Nastasha's mother. They learned that Miss Tate's mother is Teresa Tate, and that she would be the person who would know where Nastasha Tate is if anybody knew. This was a significant breakthrough, bringing them closer to the fugitive than ever before, tapping into a fundamental, often unbreakable, bond. When investigators finally spoke with Teresa Tate, she offered a profoundly poignant, if not tragic, narrative about her daughter's life, laying bare a history of struggle. She painted a pretty sad story of what Nastasha's life had been. The backstory, while not in any way an excuse for the heinous crime committed, offered a glimpse into a fractured, challenging existence. Had a pretty rough upbringing, couldn't read, couldn't write, had been introduced to prostitution at a fairly young age by a friend who she had kind of grown up with, who was a few years older. Her mother, with a heavy heart but commendable honesty, was brutally transparent about her daughter's world. She was very honest and upfront about, "Yeah, my daughter is associated with bad people. She's had multiple pimps. She has prosecuted herself throughout the country." Teresa also revealed her own desperate, ongoing attempts to rescue her daughter from this perilous path, a mother's relentless struggle. She'd been trying to help her really get out of this world for a long period of time. But because Nastasha did not want that help, their communication had broken down, a painful concession of maternal failure to reach her wayward child. Despite this fractured relationship and periods of strained communication, Teresa maintained a thread of contact, however tenuous. She revealed that Nastasha, ever secretive and evasive, would only tell her very little about where she was. She would meticulously avoid specific, traceable details, a practiced art of digital and physical concealment. She would never tell her anything specific. This was a recognizable pattern of behavior Teresa acknowledged. She said she's hidden in the past and laid low, but not really to this extent. The sheer geographical range of Nastasha's previous movements painted a daunting picture for law enforcement, emphasizing the global nature of modern manhunts. Nastasha had spent time in Los Angeles, Minnesota, New York, Florida, Nevada, so really she could have been anywhere. This widespread transient lifestyle, born of a life lived outside conventional norms, made the pursuit exceptionally challenging, akin to finding a needle in a continent-sized haystack. Before leaving, the detective made a crucial, empathetic overture to Teresa. When I left my business card and my phone number, and I told her, hey, if her daughter reached out to her, to let me know so that we could try to follow up, and she told her she would. This was a fragile but vital seed planted, trusting in a mother's underlying desire for a child's safety and future. Even amidst grave criminal accusations, the appeal, subtly made, leaned on a hope that a mother's instinct might transcend fear and denial. To bolster their increasingly urgent cross-country search, detectives wisely enlisted the formidable resources of the U.S. Marshal Service, known for their unparalleled expertise in tracking down fugitives across vast distances and jurisdictions. They also judiciously filed subpoenas for Nastasha's social media accounts, knowing that the digital footprint often reveals far more than intentional communication, painting a candid picture of a person's life. When these crucial legally obtained records were finally received and meticulously analyzed, they proved to be also very enlightening, casting a harsh, revealing light on Nastasha's precise motivations and, shockingly, her clear premeditation. The content of her messages, once revealed, was chillingly direct and unambiguous. She stated that she was looking for a gun from somebody. This was no casual inquiry. It indicated a deliberate, calculated intent to acquire a firearm, shattering any lingering notion of a spontaneous, accidental act of violence. Another message, couched in street vernacular, was equally telling and incriminating. Another one was like almost an invitation to another person, like, hey, can you come join me to do this lick? The street slang term lick clearly referred to a robbery or substantial score, explicitly indicating a planned criminal enterprise, not a chance encounter. The temporal proximity of these communications further solidified the picture of a cold, calculated plan. In the day before and even the day of Mr. Pearson's death and the time that she was at his house, she was reaching out to multiple people on Facebook, talking about a big lick, kind of big score. The convergence of these communications painted an unmistakable portrait of deliberate intent, far removed from an accidental outcome, establishing beyond doubt a mind intent on felony. A deeper dive into Nastasha's digital persona and her stated material aspirations further underscored the primary motivator for her actions, highlighting a superficial materialism. And looking at Nastasha's social media, she liked shiny things. She liked everyone around the Mercedes. She liked to have possessions. This superficial drive for immediate material gratification and status symbols, juxtaposed with her precarious, often illicit financial situation, clarified the underlying impulse behind her criminal enterprise. It led us to believe that primary motivator for what Nastasha did, it was greed, it was money. The psychological profile emerging was one driven by a profound desire for immediate acquisition and material goods, overriding any moral or ethical considerations, valuing shiny objects over human life. The evidence, meticulously woven together from multiple, disparate sources, painted an undeniably clear, coherent picture. The picture is becoming much more crystal clear that this was a planned event, that this wasn't something that she went there, and it was a crime of passion she intended to do this, and that she was setting herself up to do this to Mr. Pearson. The narrative was now one of premeditated murder for financial gain, orchestrated by an individual who meticulously planned her heinous act, seeing a wealthy man as merely a target for her insatiable avarice. The desperate manhunt for Nastasha Tate continued, a frantic, global pursuit spanning over 3,000 miles. Investigators held their breath, hoping for a breakthrough, a vital tip that would finally bring the fugitive to justice. But as Natasha Tate's own mother In a moment of agonizing truth-telling, confessed the detective, "I just kept telling her your best bet is to turn yourself in because if you're running from something, it's just going to make it so much worse." The stark wisdom of a mother, however strained the relationship, often cuts to the very core of undeniable truth, recognizing futility of prolonged escape. The relentless hunt for Nastasha Tate, a grueling, month-long saga stretching from the serene Pacific Northwest to the sunny expanses of the deep South, was fraught with the tantalizing absence of Jimmy Pearson's suspected killer. Investigators had diligently cast their net wide, following every lead, meticulously analyzing every digital breadcrumb and every physical clue, but Nastasha, with her practiced transience and skill at evading capture, remained frustratingly out of reach, a ghost in the vast American landscape. Yet, on a pivotal April 7th, in 2021, the seemingly insurmountable distance and the deepening mystery began to close, as investigators finally received a crucial, game-changing lead that redirected their focus to a specific object. The fugitive's coveted Mercedes, an object of her stated desire for shiny things, and a symbol of the material gain she so desperately craved, ultimately proved to be her unwitting betrayer. Law enforcement agencies, meticulously alerted to its distinct description, had circulated a bulletin across multiple states. They put out this notice to all law enforcement they're looking for this Mercedes. The wide-ranging net finally tightened when the vehicle, having traveled thousands of miles cross-country, unexpectedly ends up getting towed in Portland. This was a moment of sheer serendipity, a seemingly mundane bureaucratic event holding immense consequence for a high-stakes homicide investigation. The detective handling the primary case, upon learning of the tow, immediately recognized its paramount importance and made a call to the impound and said, "Do not release this vehicle to anybody. We're going to come down and get it." In a further twist of fate that underscored the unfolding drama, even as the tow company secured the vehicle, an unexpected party arrived at the lot, attempting to reclaim it. That's when we were told that someone else had arrived and was trying to get the vehicle released. To them, this individual turned out to be a friend of Nastasha Tate's, a woman identified as Monique. The tow company, now keenly aware of the vehicle's significance to a major homicide investigation due to the detective's urgent call, prudently asked her to stick around, and detectives wanted to talk to her. Monique, under immediate questioning, corroborated a critical detail that offered the next lead. Monique claimed she bought the car from Nastasha a month prior. Her story was straightforward, explaining her legal claim to the vehicle. Nastasha, she said, had informed her she was going to leave town, and she said, "I'll take you." The detective, keenly focused on the ultimate objective of locating Nastasha, directly inquired. I stated, "Okay, do you know where Nastasha is now?" Monique, perhaps initially protective or genuinely unsure of precise details, replied that she didn't know where she was. However, she did offer another invaluable piece of information, an almost casual admission that would ignite a new geographical phase of pursuit. But she and her boyfriend had driven Nastasha to a bus stop on March 11th. This clearly placed Nastasha on the move, likely attempting to further distance herself from the crime scene and obscure her tracks. The detective pressed for further specifics, seeking a clearer destination. Did she see where she was headed? But Monique's memory or willingness to fully cooperate was limited in that particular moment, perhaps fearing repercussions or truly lacking detailed information. What she did reveal, however, was crucial in its implications, setting the stage for an unprecedented cross-country pursuit. According to Monique, Nastasha had an unexpected and profoundly telling change of plans after leaving Oregon. She did call me a couple of days after she left, and she was in Florida. The mere mention of Florida, a vast expanse over 3,000 miles away from a crime scene in Oregon, dramatically transformed the scope and complexity of the investigation. adding a new layer of difficulty and urgency. Furthermore, Monique detected a profound shift in Nastasia's demeanor, a psychological indicator of deep distress and guilt. She was being really weird, and I kept saying, "What's wrong? What did you do?" Nastasia's responses were cryptic, evasive, and urgent, revealing a desperate, almost primal need to escape the consequences of her actions. She was like, "I can't tell you. I just got to get away. I just got to get away." The language was unequivocal, the behavior deeply suspicious, screaming of a dark secret. Monique also explained the challenges in maintaining communication with the now fugitive. Detectives asked if there was any way that we could get a hold of her to try to track her down. Monique said that there really wasn't any clear way to get a hold of her because her number was changing and she was communicating on a Wi-Fi only phone. Learning that Nastasia Tate was now potentially in Florida definitely added some complexity to the investigation. The sheer geographical distance was immense, stretching resources and time. We couldn't be further away in Oregon from Florida. This now demanded seamless, rapid interagency cooperation across the entire continent, a symphony of coordinated law enforcement efforts. Just 2 days later, as detectives in Oregon worked assiduously with Florida police, coordinating their efforts to precisely pinpoint Nastasia's elusive location, a pivotal moment occurred. Her mother, Teresa Tate, in a decision fraught with maternal conflict, but ultimately driven by a desperate hope for her daughter, contacted them, requesting a meeting. Her request came with a specific, revealing condition. She didn't want us to meet at her residence. She said she didn't want her neighbors to see her talking to the police. This demonstrated Teresa's profound discomfort and emotional strain, caught between her daughter's plight and her own sense of community standing and potential social repercussions. Understanding the delicacy of the situation and the critical nature of gaining her trust, detectives complied immediately and discreetly. So we met her in some parking lot at a shopping center, a neutral, inconspicuous location. In this quiet, suburban setting, Teresa Tate finally revealed the full truth, confessing to a deliberate, painful deception she had maintained previously. She informed us that she had been communicating periodically with her daughter Nastasia, even though she told us she had been hearing from her. Her earlier denial stemmed from a powerful, visceral mother's protective instinct, a desperate, fading hope to shield her child from the crushing weight of the law. Teresa then, with a heavy heart, explained the content of their clandestine, intermittent communications, revealing her efforts to guide Nastasia towards accountability. Teresa explains that she's been trying to convince her daughter to turn herself in. Her words, born of hard-won wisdom from a life lived and observed, were direct and uncompromising, a blend of maternal concern and stark realism. I just kept telling her, your best bet is to get your expletive taken care of and turn yourself in, whatever it is, because if you're running from something, it's just going to make it so much worse. This unwavering motherly advice, while perhaps blunt in its delivery, was a sincere, agonizing effort to guide Nastasia toward the only viable path to avoid an even graver future, to face the consequences now before they became impossibly entangled. Hoping to finally pin down the fugitive's elusive location and leverage this crucial familial bond, detectives cautiously yet firmly asked Teresa to make contact with Nastasia. Knowing the inherent emotional cost of such a request, it was a morally complex proposition, asking a mother to essentially aid in the capture of her own child, to engage in an act of profound betrayal for the sake of justice. But Teresa, despite the deep pain, recognized the inescapable reality of the situation and the diminishing options. I'd be fine with that, because that's the only way we're going to get her, and she needs to be bought. At this point, her internal struggle was profoundly evident, yet her resolve for justice, or at least for her daughter to face the inevitable consequences of her actions, was firm, a testament to her sense of moral duty. As much as it just feels so against the grain, I know it's the right thing to do for her anyway. The stage was set for a difficult, yet absolutely necessary, betrayal for the sake of uncovering the truth and ensuring justice. The plan was executed with swift, surgical precision, leveraging both human cooperation and technological prowess. We left, and then a short time after we parted the company, she contacts Deputy Sanders, who was on the U.S. Marshals Task Force, and they'll say, "Hey, FYI, she contacted me on the phone." This immediate notification, a testament to Reece's difficult but critical cooperation, provided the golden thread, a fresh, active phone number. So then we knew that that was a good number that we could use to try to track her. Once that phone number was secured, the next steps were immediate and technically sophisticated. A textbook example of modern digital forensics. Once they get that phone number and they do what's called a trap and trace and determine that she was in a bus stop not that far from the Tampa Bay Police Department. The precision of modern technology had miraculously whittled down an entire continent into a single, identifiable, very localized area. A Tampa Bay police officer, discreetly dispatched to the specified bus stop, found Nastasia Tate exactly where the digital forensics had so accurately predicted. Her appearance made her readily identifiable, even in a bustling public space. A distinctive figure in any crowd. She stands out a little bit. She's got an unusual look to her, and some tattoo on her face that's somewhat recognizable. Another crucial detail, a visual link to the crime scene itself, further confirmed her identity beyond doubt. Nastasia is carrying the same sweatshirt. This was not just any sweatshirt. It was a very distinct hoodie with some words on it. Bougie or something along that line. This unique item, prominently seen in the Ring doorbell footage from Jimmy's house, solidified the positive identification for the local officers. Understanding the extreme gravity of the situation and the inherent risks of apprehending a murder suspect, the detectives got to keep an open mind to the possibility of fight or struggle. However, a more cautious, covert approach was initially taken. They covertly took a picture of her in the area and sent it to detectives, ensuring absolute certainty before making a move. The image landed swiftly in the hands of the Oregon investigators. A ping from 3,000 miles away. They sent to me, "Hey, is this her?" And I was able to positively identify that that was her. The final, authoritative confirmation was issued, cutting through any remaining ambiguity. At that point I told them, yeah, that's her. With her identity confirmed and her precise location secured, the moment of truth had dramatically arrived. Once they confirmed that that was her, she was, cooperative. They then took her into custody. The multi-state manhunt, fueled by relentless investigative work and interagency collaboration, had finally reached its dramatic, decisive conclusion. The news traveled fast, bringing a sense of relief to the weary investigators. I was told she's in custody, and travel arrangements were made for myself and my partner, Detective Michael Zacher, to fly out to Tampa, Florida immediately. The flight across the country represented the final journey towards justice. The journey to Tampa, a whirlwind of logistics, anticipatory adrenaline, and professional focus, brought the Oregon detectives face to face with a woman accused of Jimmy Pearson's murder. We went to an interview room, and Nastasia was brought to us. The encounter, for Nastasia, was an inevitable reckoning, and her initial response was terse, revealing a mix of resignation, defensiveness, and a desire to control the narrative. The lead detective, with seasoned composure, laid out the stakes clearly. I was like a quarter point of blame. I just want you to be aware that once we leave, that's basically our opportunity to tell us what happened, until travel. Her reply was immediate, clipped, and unequivocally dismissive. Yeah, I just don't like this interview. This initial stone wall of silence, this strategic retreat into non-engagement, was typical of individuals facing grave accusations, a psychological defense mechanism often employed to avoid self-incrimination. Tasha Tate was formally charged with first-degree robbery and second-degree murder, charges that accurately reflected the premeditated nature of the crime and the accompanying extensive theft from the victim's home, while she was being meticulously processed and extradited across the country, slowly making her way back to Oregon to face the full weight of justice. Jimmy's family finally received the news they had desperately awaited: the arrest of their father's suspected killer. We were so excited, it was like we were the lottery. It was a moment of profound, almost cathartic relief, a glimmer of hope after a month of agonizing uncertainty, a long-awaited crack in the wall of their grief. However, as the detectives revealed the identity of the suspect, a new wave of shock and disbelief washed over them, quickly dampening their nascent relief. They did give us the name, and then we, started looking it up because we'd never seen her before. The visual details of Tasha Tate were jarring and deeply unsettling to Jimmy's daughters, Sarah and Tanya. She had 2 tattoos on her forehead. This detail immediately, powerfully conflicted with their idealized understanding of their father and his social circle. There's no way. Dad hated tattoos. Dad did not associate with those kind of people. This visceral, almost desperate reaction spoke volumes about their idealized image of their father and their profound psychological difficulty in reconciling it with the harsh reality of his tragic, sordid end. And there's just no way. We didn't believe it. The human psyche often struggles to accept truths that contradict deeply held beliefs, especially concerning loved ones, as it forces a painful reevaluation of reality. After a grueling month-long investigation, marked by meticulous detail and relentless pursuit, 23-year-old Tasha Tate had been successfully apprehended and charged with the murder of Jimmy Pearson. As prosecutors diligently began the meticulous preparation of their formidable case for trial, the accumulating evidence against her continued to grow, strengthening with each forensic report and corroborating testimony. The forensic analysis, so crucial in establishing undeniable scientific links, delivered conclusive and damning results. All of the evidence from the ballistics are all indicating the gun that was in her car 12 minutes after she left the house is the gun that caused his death. This scientific certainty, the undeniable match between the bullet recovered from the victim and the firearm seized from the suspect shortly after the crime, effectively removed any lingering doubt about the murder weapon, cementing the direct, irrefutable connection between Tasha Tate and the fatal shot that ended Jimmy Pearson's life. Prosecutors firmly believed that the shooting was not a random act of passion, a spontaneous outburst of violence, but rather part of a premeditated plan, carefully conceived and ruthlessly executed for personal gain. They acknowledged Nastasha's difficult and often tragic past, a history that, while in no way excusing her heinous actions, offered a glimpse into profound societal forces that might have shaped her choices and warped her worldview. She, as the evidence would indicate, was influenced and manipulated and trafficked in her past. This candid recognition of her deeply challenging history highlighted a potential struggle for agency and autonomy, a life lived under the shadow of exploitation. And this was her one opportunity to turn things around and take control on her own. However, this opportunity, tragically, was violently framed by a singular, destructive need that eclipsed any moral compass. But she needed money to do that. This motive, rooted in financial desperation and a misguided, ultimately criminal quest for self-sufficiency through illicit means, painted a dark and complex psychological portrait of a life driven by circumstances and, ultimately, by greed. But as the ominous court date approached, with the formidable weight of forensic evidence and compelling circumstantial details arrayed against her, Tasha Tate, under the guidance of legal counsel, opted to pursue a plea bargain instead of facing the daunting prospect of a full trial before a jury. This decision was a strategic calculation, A cold assessment of risks and potential outcomes by both the defense and the prosecution. If we were to go to trial, we might not be able to prove the first-degree murder. The prosecution acknowledged, reflecting the nuanced challenges of a justice system demanding absolute certainty. The legal challenge stemmed from the lack of a direct, eyewitness account of the precise moment of the murder itself. Since we don't have any eyewitnesses as to what actually happened in there, it's all circumstantial evidence. While the circumstantial evidence was powerful and cohesive in a courtroom setting, it could sometimes leave just enough room for a cunning defense to sow seeds of doubt and make a first-degree conviction more challenging. Therefore, a compromise was reached, a grim but legally sound solution that ensured conviction and substantial incarceration. We came to agreement that she would plead to the second-degree murder, which is also a true life sentence, but with consideration of parole after 25 years. This agreement guaranteed a conviction and significant, lengthy incarceration while potentially mitigating the absolute certainty required for the higher charge of first-degree murder. A key condition of the plea deal, however, was Nastasia's willingness to finally break her persistent silence and offer a narrative of what transpired that fateful night in Jimmy Pearson's home. We said that we would be fine with doing that plea if she would give us a statement as to what happened and how it happened and why it happened. This was an opportunity, not just for legal closure, but more profoundly for the grieving family to gain some understanding, however incomplete or unsatisfying, of their profound, irreparable loss. In December 2021, months after her apprehension, Nastasia Tate, as per the agreement, provided Jimmy's family with a statement, a confession of sorts, though meticulously constructed to mitigate her culpability and paint her actions in a more accidental light. Her statement was that she had been up a few nights on a binger drinking and doing drugs, and that when she had gotten over there, they had a drink, and then they had went to the room and had a drink in there, and then she was going to give them a back massage, and she reached down into her bag and pulled out a gun, and he moved, and it went off, and then she panicked and didn't know what to do. This carefully crafted narrative sought to establish an accidental discharge, fueled by intoxication and fear. She claims that it was an accident, yet she robbed him still and fled. The glaring inconsistency between her claim of a mere accident and her subsequent actions, the thorough ransacking of the home and her immediate flight, however, directly contradicted her narrative, as the investigators and family were quick to point out with incredulity. If it was truly an accident, you probably would have made different choices. They reflected, highlighting the clear, self-serving nature of her story, the compelling social media evidence of her looking for a gun, the meticulous ransacking of the home, the deliberate act of wearing gloves, and her planned, expedited departure, all fundamentally dismantled the flimsy claim of a chaotic, drunken mishap. She was looking for a gun. It's not self-defense. It's not an accident. It's something that was motivated by money and greed. Sarah, Jimmy's daughter, encapsulated the family's profound certainty, speaking with the raw, searing honesty of unbearable loss. I don't believe it was even the truth of actually how things went down. I think it was premeditated, 100%. The depth of their pain was immeasurable, the void left by his absence acute and agonizing. She took away my dad. She took away my best friend, the one that I looked up to, my kid's grandfather that they'll never get to know. She took away our future with him. The words articulated the agonizing, irreplaceable void left by Nastasia's actions, a permanent wound in the fabric of their lives. And, yes, it's horrible, something you can't get back. For Sarah, the prospect of directly confronting her father's killer in person remained a complex, deeply personal struggle, an internal debate between the yearning for answers and the desire to deny the perpetrator any further power. Sometimes I think about setting up a time to go and see her in prison and ask her for myself, face to face, But then I go back and don't want to give her that time of day. Maybe someday I will. This internal conflict speaks to the prolonged agony of grief, the push and pull between seeking closure, and the understandable desire to refuse any acknowledgement to the individual who caused such irreparable harm. Jimmy Pearson, the man at the heart of this tragedy, deserved to be remembered not for the violent, sordid circumstances of his death, nor for the complexities of his personal life, but for the vibrant, ambitious, and impactful life he led. Jimmy should be remembered as someone to aspire to on so many levels, as a father figure, as an entrepreneur, a business owner. There are a lot of outstanding qualities one would aspire to. Beyond his considerable material success and business acumen, he possessed an innate goodness, a fundamental generosity of spirit that resonated deeply with those who knew him well. Jimmy was a truly compassionate and kind soul in giving. His legacy, a testament to his resilience, his unwavering entrepreneurial spirit, and his profound work ethic, continued vibrantly through his most cherished possessions and projects, his pawn shops, now nurtured by his devoted daughters. His daughters that have now taken over A1 Hawk. They completely lived by his life with everything. Their dedication to his memory was not merely symbolic. It was tangible and deeply ingrained in their daily operations. The businesses ran the same exact way that Jim ran it, even listening to the same radio station for the past 8 years. It was a profound act of honoring his memory, a living monument to his enduring influence, a way to keep his spirit alive within the very heart of his creations. In their shared, profound grief, his daughters found an unbreakable bond, forged in the crucible of unbearable loss. My sister and I, having sickened together, and as much as it's hard, especially both being hurt, that we just have to stick together. Despite the unbearable weight of their sorrow, they drew strength from his enduring presence, a guiding force that transcended physical absence. Dad is still teaching us from up above, they believed, carrying his lessons and his love forward. Their memories, vibrant, cherished, and rich with affection, became a constant source of comfort amidst the pain. We think about all the good memories that we had with our dad. He will never be forgotten. His essence, his spirit, his indelible mark on their lives lingered, a constant, comforting presence. I don't think that there's an hour that goes by that he doesn't cross my mind. The tragic narrative of Jimmy Pearson's murder and the meticulous, dedicated efforts of law enforcement to bring his killer to justice serves as a poignant, cautionary reminder of both the darkness that can lurk within human hearts when greed overtakes, empathy, and the unwavering resolve of justice to prevail. It highlights the critical importance of community awareness, the intricate pathways of modern forensic detection, the resilience of investigative forces, and the profound, enduring power of familial love in the face of unspeakable sorrow. It is a testament to the ultimate triumph of good, even when shadowed by the most heinous of evils, an inspiration for continued vigilance and unwavering commitment to truth. The world, in its often deceptive calm, holds within its intricate fabric threads of profound peace and sudden, jarring violence. March 3rd, 2021, presented just such a stark contrast, where the veneer of tranquility was brutally torn asunder. In the serene, affluent embrace of Clackamas County, Oregon, a narrative began to unfold that would ultimately span continents, delving deep into the intricate psychology of human desire, desperation, and the ultimate price of unchecked avarice. It was a crisp morning, as precise as the digital readout on the clock indicated. Exactly 11:28 a.m. when the piercing, urgent squawk of a 911 call sliced through the quietude of a sprawling waterfront home. The voice on the other end, strained with a palpable mixture of shock and dawning horror, reported a discovery that would irrevocably alter the landscape of several lives, particularly those of the wealthy entrepreneur, Jimmy Pearson, and the beloved family he had so diligently built and nurtured. "How can I help you?" The dispatcher's voice, a calm, anchoring presence in what was rapidly brewing into a storm of profound human tragedy. Must have seemed almost unreal, detached from the visceral terror, to the caller. Tony Morell, the voice identified, delivered a statement that, in its halting urgency, would quickly escalate from a simple welfare check to a full-blown homicide investigation, echoing the abrupt, horrifying transition from peaceful morning to bloody tableau. I came over my boss's house, and I found him, and he said. The phrase hung incomplete, heavy with unspoken dread, a fragment hinting at an unimaginable horror witnessed by a loyal friend and employee. The dispatcher, with practice efficiency honed by countless calls to the precipice of human suffering, sought immediate clarity through standard protocol. Okay, is he cold for the tough drive, Steph? The very clinical nature of the question, stripping away emotional preamble to focus on critical physical indicators, underscored the absolute gravity of the situation. This was not merely an accident or an illness, but a crime scene, signaling that the individual in question was tragically beyond the reach of emergency medical intervention already claimed by an unseen hand. Mr. Morell, it transpired, was far more than just an employee. He was a friend, a confidant, a long-standing associate to the 62-year-old Jimmy Pearson. His concern had mounted steadily over several preceding days, an unsettling quietude descending from Mr. Pearson, a man typically engaged, gregarious, and vital, someone whose absence from communication was profoundly out of character, a red flag flapping gently in the winds of unease. It was an anomaly that, to Tony, felt fundamentally wrong, an intuition that soon gave way to grim reality. What he discovered upon gaining entry to the opulent, upscale residence on the serene Willamette River, however, surpassed any premonition, catapulting him from mild concern into an abyss of unadulterated shock and horror. Mr. Pearson was found naked, a deeply disturbing detail in itself, revealing a state of profound vulnerability and unexpected intimacy, but far more alarming, overwhelmingly horrifying, was the sight of blood all pooling on his head. The raw, visceral sight, the crimson stain spreading across what had been a personal sanctuary, was enough to induce immediate flight. Mr. Morell, overcome by a primal surge of fear and a desperate, instinctual need to distance himself from the horror, exited the opulent residence with haste, his breath catching his throat, and immediately placed that fateful call to 911. The instinct to remove himself, to establish a safe perimeter before summoning aid, speaks to the profound, disorienting shock a layman experiences upon encountering such an unthinkable scene. His cooperation, however, would prove invaluable to the burgeoning investigation. This initial call, an urgent cry for help amidst a backdrop of unimaginable tragedy, was swiftly dispatched to Deputy Fredrickson, one of the dedicated patrol deputies whose daily duty it was to respond to the myriad crises, both mundane and macabre, that punctuate everyday life in Clackamas County. Upon arrival, the scene itself was a testament to Mr. Pearson's remarkable success, a poignant and stark contrast to the unfolding tragedy. It was a very nice home in a very nice neighborhood, an environment typically synonymous with tranquility, affluence, an ingrained expectation of security. The grand driveways of these residences, emblematic of their exclusivity, were formidable, often gated and requiring a specific, intimate code for entry. This immediately suggested an element of exclusivity, reinforcing the idea that whoever gained access to this domain was either expected and invited, thereby suggesting an internal dynamic to the crime, or possessed a clandestine, illegal means to circumvent these formidable layers of security, thereby indicating either an inside job or a highly sophisticated break-in, a challenge for even the most adept criminal. The home itself was described as very nice and very large, a statement of material comfort and sprawling luxury that now, chillingly, framed a scene of stark brutality, inadvertently becoming a stage for a deeply personal drama that had turned irrevocably macabre. Deputy Fredrickson, a man whose professional life was often spent confronting life's uglier, more challenging aspects, entered the master bedroom with the practiced caution of a seasoned officer, his senses on high alert. There, the grim tableau presented itself. An unresponsive male victim, later confirmed to be Jimmy Pearson, lying lifeless on the opulent bed. His position was unnerving, unsettlingly peaceful, yet deeply disturbing in its implications. Face down with his hands kind of up over his head, tucked up under his pillows. This peculiar, almost relaxed, posture would later become a critical piece of the puzzle for investigators, hinting at the suddenness of the assault, suggesting the victim was likely in a state of deep relaxation, possibly even sleep, or caught entirely off guard, and certainly indicating the absence of any anticipatory struggle. He didn't see it coming, a fact that will become central to the psychological profile of the crime. The visible presence of blood around his head area on the bed was unmistakable, painting a vivid and horrifying picture that no amount of wealth, luxury, or pristine surroundings could possibly obscure. A crimson stain on the pristine linen, symbolizing the brutal, irreversible interruption of life. A swift and practiced search of the immediate bedroom area was conducted, adhering meticulously to standard protocols for securing and initially assessing a potential crime scene, which quickly confirmed the victim's identity. Deputy Fredrickson efficiently located a wallet on the nightstand, which had an ID card in it. The identification card bore the name Jimmy Pearson, and its image appeared to match the deceased person on the bed, solidifying the grim reality that the homeowner, the man of this opulent abode, was indeed the victim of this sudden violent end. In those initial adrenaline-charged moments, Deputy Fredrickson, observing the significant volume of blood, prudently considered various possibilities, allowing his training to guide his rapid assessment. He moved one of the pillows to see if there was any firearm, operating under professional hunch that, because the amount of blood, I think he was guessing that it may have been a gunshot wound. The sheer volume and pattern of the blood initially obscured the precise nature of the injury, leaving the question open as to its origin and, crucially, whether it was self-inflicted. He couldn't determine where the blood was coming from, and he didn't know if it was self-inflicted. This brief window of uncertainty, however, would soon give way to chilling clarity as more expert eyes arrived to peel back the layers of the tragedy. After this preliminary sweep of the scene, a critical observation was made that immediately altered the trajectory of initial suspicions, shifting the focus decisively toward foul play. No weapon is located. This was a pivotal finding, almost instantaneously ruling out the possibility of suicide, despite the fleeting consideration of a self-inflicted wound based on the nature of the injury. People, with very rare and highly unusual exceptions that often involve elaborate, often physically impossible, staging, do not typically shoot themselves and then effectively erase the weapon from the immediate scene. This absence screamed of foul play, indicating a perpetrator had removed a crucial piece of evidence. However, other disquieting signs presented themselves throughout the expansive home, indicative of what looks like a break-in. The phrase, though understated in its formal police reporting, spoke volumes of chaotic intent and desperate opportunism. The entire house had been ransacked, drawers opened, things obviously missing, like someone had gone through just about every room and looked through everything. The meticulous disarray of the opulent home, a violent undoing of order, painted a picture not of targeted violence alone, but of a crime compounded by blatant opportunism and theft, suggesting a desperate grab for any and all valuables within reach, blurring the lines between murder and larceny. Homicide detectives, the seasoned veterans of such macabre puzzles, arrived swiftly, their methodical presence a stark counterpoint to the chaotic scene. Their entry was followed by the solemn procession of the medical examiner, whose expert I would soon begin to unravel the physiological narrative of Jimmy Pearson's final moments, meticulously gathering scientific evidence where visual and circumstantial clues left frustrating gaps. The first sensory detail that struck them upon entering the master bedroom was profoundly unsettling, a grim indicator of the inexorable passage of time, a really pungent smell of decomposition. This indicated, with grim scientific certainty, that Mr. Pearson had been dead for several days. The revelation instantly added another layer of complexity to the nascent investigation, challenging the one of the crime, a factor as critical and elusive as the how and the who. This meant a crucial window of initial, fresh evidence might have been lost, complicating the vital reconstruction of the timeline. As the medical examiner meticulously began their preliminary inspection of the body, exercising the utmost care not to disturb potential trace evidence, the nature of the injury became horrifyingly clear. They did find what appeared to be a bullet wound to the back of the deceased's head. This singular, stark detail extinguished any lingering possibility of suicide or an accidental death, immediately and unequivocally reclassifying the case as a probable homicide. While definitive confirmation always awaits a full pathological examination in the controlled environment of a morgue, we weren't going to be able to 100% say that he died of a homicide. The immediate operational response from the law enforcement team was unwavering and absolute, but we were treating it as a homicide. The investigative axiom articulated by the officers themselves was chillingly pertinent, bordering on a gallows humor that only experienced detectives, hardened by their work, truly understand. People, when they commit suicide, don't typically shoot themselves in the back of the head. This logical deduction, simple yet profoundly powerful, combined with the earlier observation of the absence of a weapon, underscored a calculated malice and sinister intent inherent in the act. The sudden, violent end to a life, perpetrated from behind, suggested something far more insidious than despair or a moment of accidental tragedy. The initial stages of any complex homicide investigation are often riddled with what detectives, with weary resignation, refer to as a lot of unknowns. The sheer volume of questions, both immediate and long-term, from the trivial to the profound, can be daunting and overwhelming. The critical first step, therefore, was to establish a timeline, to discover with as much precision as possible when something occurred. This required casting a wide net, an empathetic yet methodical outreach, reaching out to family, friends, anybody that can give us an indication of where they've been, what they've been doing, and who they've been spending time with. In the shadowy, often fragmented world of criminal investigation, every shred of information, every casual memory, every seemingly insignificant interaction held the potential to illuminate the path forward, a mosaic of disparate data points slowly, but surely forming a cohesive picture of the victim's final days and hours. The victim's life story, his past, his present relationships, and his habits now became inextricably linked with the pursuit of justice for his untimely and violent end, an open book for the cold, analytical gaze of the investigators. Jimmy Pearson, born on a warm August 19th in 1957, hailed from Dearborn, Michigan. He was one of 4 siblings, navigating a home life that was, in the words of those who knew it, anything but perfect. This familial complexity, marked by early struggles and a sense of instability, was dominated by his father, Al Pearson, who had once been a figure of public renown, having played professional hockey for the esteemed Detroit Red Wings. Such a background often implies glamour, but in their case, it also carried a deep, pervasive shadow. His father was an alcoholic, so that put a damper on his mom and his relationship. The insidious disease of addiction, as it so often does, cast a long and destructive pall over their family dynamics, eroding trust and stability, ultimately leading to the fracturing of the nuclear unit. Jimmy's mother, a woman of profound resilience and fortitude, confronted these harsh realities head-on, taking decisive action, and ended up divorcing his dad when he was very young. This early exposure to familial strife and separation to a world that didn't always conform to idyllic expectations, to the stark realities of a broken home, would undoubtedly shape young Jimmy's outlook on life and forge within him a profound, enduring drive for stability, success, and perhaps control over his own destiny. Faced with the daunting challenge of raising 4 children on her own, a task requiring immense strength and sacrifice, Jimmy's mother made a courageous, decisive decision. She moved them to Oregon in search of a fresh start, a testament to her unwavering determination to build a better, more secure life, a new chapter for her progeny away from past traumas. In this new landscape, however, economic realities were harsh, demanding relentless effort and a deep understanding of self-reliance. She had 4 kids, so she spent a lot of hours at work, and they pretty much had to fend for themselves. This era of profound self-reliance, born of necessity and the stark imperative of survival, instilled in Jimmy an extraordinary, almost innate, work ethic and an early, intuitive understanding of financial independence and personal responsibility, teaching him to seize opportunities. He saw his mom working all the time, so he thought he could help out. Even at a tender age, Jimmy exhibited an impressive entrepreneurial spirit, a budding talent for enterprise, proactively mowing lawns, doing whatever he could provide to bring in money. These formative years, marked by hard work, ingenuity, and self-sufficiency, sculpted a young man of grit, ambition, and a deep-seated desire for both personal security and significant financial achievement, values that would define his adult life. By his early 20s, Jimmy Pearson had matured into a hard-working, ambitious young man ready to start a family of his own. His trajectory seemed clear, a man determined to forge his own path, consciously distinct from the tumultuous beginnings of his childhood, aspiring to create the stability he lacked growing up. It was in this period that he encountered Sandra, a meeting that would blossom into a shared future, painting a picture of youthful promise and new beginnings. I met Jimmy in the summer that I turned 18, and I met him at the houseboat, Sandra recounted, her voice carrying the wistful echoes of cherished, foundational memories. Their introduction was casual, almost cinematic in its simplicity and everyday charm. My sister was dating somebody who was a good friend of Jimmy's. Life's serendipitous moments, those seemingly minor convergences, often lead to profound, life-altering connections, laying the groundwork for a shared history that would ripple through decades. Following the commencement of their courtship, Jimmy, ever the nascent entrepreneur, embarked upon his first professional venture, a testament to his innate business acumen and relentless drive to build